whatever you're sort of an expert on, that's really why people would tune into your podcast. What's your expertise?
We like science fiction, we like talking about it, but we liked a positive angle on it.
Our first workshop is with Surrey and Mark. They present a podcast. Podcast is called Space Brains and it happens fortnightly and it discusses what is good and what is great about science fiction movies. I would like to invite Science Brain Surrey and Cinema Brain Mark to the stage.
We are Space Brains. What the hell is Space Brains? Well, we set out with an agenda of basically looking at what is good and great in science fiction film. And that started with a podcast. And then today it has migrated into a film festival. One thing that we have done so far in podcasting, because that's what our session today is all about, is basically how to do a podcast. We are up to 81 episodes. So that is quite an achievement, and that is going to continue into the future. We've also got a very steady growing audience. So we started with maybe a really tiny audience of a couple of people.
Seven.
So that's episode 1, all right? And now what are we looking at, sorry?
Now we're getting over 300 in the 7 days, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, and that puts us in some sort of percentile, doesn't it?
That's actually the top 10% of podcasts.
There we go, all right? So it just shows you where you start with 7, you can sort of slowly grow. And I think that's, for us as the podcasters, excuse me, that's a really nice feeling to know that we're just having this exponential growth. We haven't had like a giant, overnight success or anything, but it's just a continued growth over time.
There was one aberration one week, shortly after we interviewed Luke Spark, who's a writer-director here. He shared a lot of posts about us and the interview, and we've got 2,700 in that one day. So it's who you know. We just need more of them.
We do. And that is something that we have done separate to our normal format, is we've had the opportunity to interview a couple of really big film directors, Luke Spark being one of them. And we've also had some interaction with film directors. And again, that has given us some natural organic growth as well in an audience, which is great. And we want to do more of that. There's our introduction. Okay, so what's this workshop all about? Just to kind of do like a really quick run through. Why should you start a podcast? Why did we actually start Space Brains? Where did that get birthed from? In our lovely introduction from Angela, it probably gives you a little bit of an insight into that. How we actually started, because I want to really make this as hands-on for everyone here as possible if you are interested in doing a podcast. What actual equipment you need to start a podcast. Tips of success, now that you know a little bit of where we've come along, and how to actually start a podcast in terms of the technicalities. We'll do that on a really basic level, but just to give you some of our actual learnt experience. And can you make money from podcasts? We don't know. No, we'll tell you some ideas of making money as well. And there's time for questions at the end.
So why would you start a podcast? First of all, you like talking a lot. It is an audio medium, and many of us might have a face for podcasts, which works really well. Because if you're concerned about public speaking or appearing to the public, it is it's not live. You can do it live if you want, but it's recorded. You do get a chance to edit it, but you will be doing a lot of talking. Sometimes you might forget to check your audio and you'll have to talk all over again. We have done that once, which was... that just about killed us. You want to start because you've got niche ideas. You've got thoughts that you feel you want to get out. You want to present, you think people would like them. So for us, we like sci-fi. I mean, we do like a lot of other things as well, but in common, we like science fiction. We like talking about it. but we liked a positive angle on it. As my intro said, I prefer the future to be more like Star Trek and less like Blade Runner, because it would be nice if we could talk to the synthetic people and have them as fellow citizens as opposed to, I don't know, murdering them, which would be rough.
And this is a really good thing to think of, because if you go look at podcasts, there's many film review sort of styled shows of podcasts. There's probably thousands of podcasts that actually do that, movie reviews. So for Surrey and me, it was, when we started, it was thinking, okay, well, what's a point of difference? Film reviewers can be nasty to filmmakers. I'm a filmmaker.
It's very easy.
It's very easy to kind of like, that's all the bad stuff in that movie. So it was something that as a niche, we were like, hang on, but why don't we just talk about the positives? And we talked about that, and Surrey, I think, came up with that idea of like hope punk and joy watching. So we just generally watch it and we're looking for the positives. And we have looked at some films that have, they do have some elements that we think could be improved, but we're not going to discuss that. We focus on those positives, and that's the niche. That's what sets our show apart.
And that's the podcast topic that doesn't already exist. I mean, it's much like in the world of films and stories, there's 2 stories? Person leaves town, person comes to town. Or some people talk about 7 stories, but it's your own story. That's what makes it special and different. Yeah. I think the other reason why start a podcast, you might want to build a brand or a business. There are business podcasts where there's like a medical center, and they have like a, ask a doctor a question sort of podcast. There are businesses that repair cars, and they might talk about car-related things in order to help build their brand. We are creative people who want to build a brand, if you like, in the creative space and bring people along with it. Because, as our next point is, you can intimately connect with your audience. By talking directly with them, it's more intimate than, for example, a book, a blog post, or even YouTube videos. You tend to someone sitting there watching a thing. Audio medium, people are commuting to work. They're taking a bit of quiet time, maybe going for a walk on the beach. The things that I listen to podcasts while I'm gardening. I find that very zen. It's quite nice.
You can really talk about a subject matter to the nth degree that you want to talk about. So that's something that is really intimate, rather than, say, a radio show where you might only have 3 or 4 minutes to speak to someone on a subject.
I remember one of our first conversations about the Space Brains podcast was we might have a 15 or 20 minute podcast. And as we got in, we got very passionate about talking about it, and it quickly turned into an hour and a half, 2 hours, and that's with us each. You can't see it's audio. There's a lot of wrap it up signs and move along, pointing to clocks. So, this is the good thing is, when you find your audience, you do have to keep on target and watch those corners. But it is a more intimate situation. You're not working to someone else's schedule. It can be turned on and off, stopped and started. I listen to episodes of some podcasts that are like 4 hours long, and it's in half-hour blocks, whatever, as I go along. So podcasts, though, they're getting big. There's millions of them published, but there's also, particularly since the pandemic, millions of new listeners. There's something along the lines of, there's about 70-something% of Australians have listened to a podcast at least once. As close to about 40% commonly do it. About 9 million Australians commonly each month listen to at least one podcast. So you do get a chance to participate in a large market. You get to talk about your ideas. You can get some feedback sometimes.
So it's a growing market. All right, so what are just some of the real basics to get you going? And something I definitely wanted as an agenda today was to say you can just start a podcast, because it's actually what we did, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But you don't really need a lot, and you really don't need much of a budget just to get started. And like Surrey said, like lots of people even started podcasts during the pandemic. There's no need to really go out and spend a huge amount of money to begin with. You can just start. In fact, you can start with this, okay? This is your starting point, and you don't really need to invest in much beyond that. Any type of phone can be your starting point. But some of the things you will need to think about is some sort of microphone, okay? These are anywhere from really base point microphone. You can get lapels online for like $2, up to something mid-range of about 70, and then you can go right to the top. But yeah, microphone is something you will need. A recording device, you need to record from that microphone into something that can capture your sound. So again, your phone can do that. You've probably got the voice memo. You might have used that before. People leave recorded messages on your phone. That's a recording device. Okay, so your phone is a starting point that way. However, that can migrate to your computer. You can get apps, you can get mixers that go more and more advanced and more expensive. You will need some sort of editing software as well. So editing is the whole thing, like I'm saying something and Surrey, he interrupts me again right now. And I was about to say something really great. Editing enables you to get, just delete Surrey's part out and just keep more and more of Mark's part in.
Or my alarm that occasionally goes off at 9:45 to tell me to go to bed.
So, and that's what editing is about. As a filmmaker, you edit to make a film. It's the same for this. Any sound recordings you might want to edit. We've become pretty good now. We don't need a massive amount of editing. We definitely were editing more in the beginning stages.
I'll go into the time commitments later, but you do grow in skill, and we'll talk more about that later, but certainly the editing process, you do need to take into account things like mouth noises, which blow out the audio registers, or you might find there's unacceptably long gaps, as I tend to do whenever, you can tell I'm talking because I'm looking at my waveform, there's these huge gaps in between each of my words as I carefully consider each word. So if I sound fluent on the podcast, it's because I've chopped out all of my thinking pauses. Because 2 seconds of dead air on an audio show is terrible.
Well, we all know it, right? Like if you're listening, imagine you're listening to the radio and it suddenly goes quiet. Like you probably change the channel. So this is what editing can do. You need to kind of make it better for people's ears and make sure that it's edited appropriately in that way. But you don't need much. You just need some really basic editing software. That's anything from something that's free. Your phone, again, has free editing software. Any type of phone has that, and you can get free apps and then go up and start spending more and more money. Graphics, what we just mean by that is, hey, you're going to be a podcast and it's going to be available on those platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You need some graphics, so think about like maybe a logo for your show. Think about any images that relate to what you're actually doing. Space Brains, the logo we have now is our logo, and we've had that now for 18 months roughly. But previous to that, we had a different kind of brain. And again, when we started, we just kind of started putting things out. There was 2 brains, actually, was the first thing, we had. And so we kept going down that theme. But yeah, some sort of graphic, some sort of look to what is your podcast about. If it's about fishing, probably have a fish or something on it, right? If it's about space, we've got, stars and things like that. So graphics are really important. Podcast hosting, and we'll come back to this in a little bit as well, a couple of specifics, but yeah, basically with podcasts, you need to so you record it, you edit it, you publish it, and it's a sound file. How on earth do you get it online? And so that's hosting, okay? And so we put it out, and a host site takes care of that for you and spreads it across all the platforms like Apple and Spotify and all the other places that you can get a podcast. And this is something that I've noticed some podcasters don't do so well. All right, so it's not available everywhere because everyone does listen around the world to different platforms. Like we have, Apple is really popular in Australia, but it's not as popular elsewhere. So just as an example. So just thinking about, getting your spread out as much as possible. Podcasts are free. They don't cost money for the user. So you're not going to make money. Going back to making money, we'll come back to that. You don't make money off putting your show out there, okay? But for example, I'm noticing now, so the big competition is Apple and Spotify. And what the two of them are doing is they're buying a show and making it exclusive. So, you're probably, Netflix exclusive. Now Apple Podcasts and Spotify are doing that. So the biggest podcasts in the world, those podcasts are actually making money by signing up to, say, Spotify, and it's only Spotify. But from our experience, they're the podcasts that, they've built an audience. They're the successful podcasts, okay, and that will take time. A quiet recording space. So, stages are deliberately built. We have a really great sound tech, audio-visual technician, Dylan, up there running this place today. Like, this is a sound space. It's a studio space. You could work and build that, but thinking about just a nice, quiet space. Lots of people online talk about record a podcast in a wardrobe or a cupboard. Okay, so just a really small, quiet space that you can contain. You don't want massive spaces with, large glass doors and windows and all those kind of things. And again, this is something that you can Google and find a lot about, is creating sound spaces. But yeah, the quieter, the smaller zone, the better. And if you can have some sort of padding, furniture helps. But cloths and fabrics and that can also help contain a space. When Surrey did his audio drama, he was doing everything himself to make that happen. And I played a little role in his audio drama. This was before Space Brains. And he came over to my house and he brought a blanket and we recorded. He put a blanket over my head and we recorded like this, the lines of dialogue for the character I was playing. And why was he doing that? Because he was trying to create a little quiet recording space in his budget. Okay.
Some varied success.
Yeah. And my wife keeps saying, is Surrey going to come back over and put a blanket over your head? And, you two are under the blanket. Are you recording Space Brains under a blanket? Yeah, okay, sure. So how did we start, Surrey?
How did we start? Great question. Well, we started with a conversation to get going, but we're talking about some of the equipment. Now, of course, at the start, we didn't know how far we wanted to go, what we wanted to do, necessarily how anything was going to work. I had already produced a couple podcasts, so there's about 47 episodes of an audio drama, so 3 seasons, complete story arc. Get online, it's called Exit Plan. You can find that. It's fun. If you do find it and you are curious, you're best off looking for the episodes called binge episodes. So at the end of each season, I basically condensed all the individual episodes into a single sound file. You can listen from start to finish, and I took out like the opening and closing credits and things. So it's just a bit more convenient. But what we started with some pretty minimal equipment. I started initially with the USB microphone I got from the Rock Band Xbox game, because that was the only microphone I had. It produced a reasonable sound. It was extremely sensitive. I had to sort of carefully balance. I didn't have a mic stand, so it was actually wedged into a tissue box on top of I got this rubber mat mouse pad to try and isolate some vibrations. And then I had to stand very carefully, get my level, and I'm talking to it, and I'd watch the sound levels come up, and then I hit record, and I have to very carefully stay at the exact same distance. It was very difficult, but I got through, as I said, 47 episodes of that audio drama, and then about 60-something other episodes of another podcast I was doing before we started Space Brains. Space Brains then, that wasn't going to work because it's far too sensitive a microphone. And though I had it sort of basically for free because I got that as a gift for Christmas one year, but we started with some microphones. We started off with lapel microphones. I got mine off AliExpress, and I waited 8 weeks or something for it crazy to turn up, but it was free shipping, so yeah, that's what you get.
And I had a Rode Lav for film stuff, and they're about $60 at JB and places like that, so they're not expensive, but really great little lavs, and that's what we just used. We recorded through lavs to begin with, and I think we did about 10 episodes, right?
Yeah, straight just into our mobile phone. So you want to turn your phone onto airplane mode, because if you receive a phone call or if it is struggling to connect to your Wi-Fi or something, you'll get little audio artifacts coming through. So you put it on airplane mode. Make sure you turn off all your alarms.
Fridge.
I still fail that.
Turn off the dog.
I had to turn off the fridge because the recording space we're in, which I'll get to. So we recorded on the phone. I used Audacity. I don't know how many of you are familiar with audio editing software, but Audacity is a very long-running, free, open-source software. As a result, it's got an enormous community of people who contribute to it, who talk about it, and if there's ever any help you need with it, there's always someone online who has written about it, or there's a wiki article about it or something. It's very full-featured now because it has been around for so long. There are paid versions of different software you could use which have varying automated features and artificial intelligence and things, if you like, but I'm a computer nerd. Audacity suited me just fine. We use then this thing called PreSonus Studio One. So Audacity will take an audio file and then you can manipulate it, but it doesn't do multi-tracking very well. So if you want to overlay an opening bit of music and a closing bit of music, and we've got 2 tracks, one from Mark's phone, one from my phone, and you've got to synchronize these things. Audacity is a little bit tricky to do that. You can clean the audio, each track, but to get them lined up and then mixed is a bit trickier. PreSonus is a studio company. They produce a lot of digital audio workstation sort of stuff, which is used by professionals for song creation, and it is a multi-tracking, mixing, editing suite. Their product called Studio One they have a free version, which is fully featured, but you can't add in all of their fancy stuff. And I think it limits the quality of output to something, way better than I need for a podcast. What they're worried about is professional song makers producing something that would be suitable to go to a radio station or a CD farm to produce, impress recordings type thing.
So that's a lot of the equipment, and we've covered a couple of those other bits there. Probably just the other thing is then, like, how did you come up with the component of the show? And we did a bit of a script. So we both sort of threw some ideas together, we shared a document, and those first few episodes, it was a really strict script, wasn't it? We tried to
blow by blow accounting of the film and talking a lot about it.
Yeah.
And it went, and it worked okay.
Yeah, and it worked great as a start. But that's something I also wanted to note there. Like, we started with one version, and after about 10 episodes, it was revised. And then after about 25 episodes, it was revised again. And I think by memory, episode 40, it's then sort of settled into a really comfortable sort of zone. But it's no longer a script where we're bouncing off each other and we know sort of the main points that we need to get through. So why start a podcast?
Why, Mark? Why?
Well, the first thing is you need to like to chat. And when I met Surrey, our kids are at school. He's another dad at pickup. I'm a dad at pickup, which is a little bit rare sometimes. And we started talking, the normal sort of stuff. And then at kids' birthday parties, we kept talking. And then we kind of kept talking. And our wives just said to us, you guys can really talk. Like, they could exit the room and we're still talking.
Actually, my wife said, finally, you found someone who can talk more than you.
Yeah. So and the other thing was, naturally, with our backgrounds in creativity, we kind of settled on science fiction film. Like, it was a common, Aliens. Aliens is a great film. What did you, we just started doing that. And at one point in time then, because Surrey was doing his other sort of podcast, we should just record these chats. And so that's one thing to think of, is like, do you enjoy talking? Do you enjoy, do you have someone that you talk to a lot and you could maybe make a podcast with them? Or do you just like hearing the sound of your own voice and you can just keep talking and talking? Go for it. Podcasting is for you. We mentioned our expertise. Obviously, I think I listen to a really great podcast called Creative Pep, and he's an illustrator and he's a creative guy in the US, and he's all about giving creators a bit of a pep in your step is his slogan, but purely for creative people, So his audience isn't everyone, but he relies on his expertise, which is creativity. So think about your own expertise. Like Surrey mentioned, you might be running a business, a mechanical business, and so your expertise is car engines, or redoing up old classic cars. That's the podcast for you. So whatever you're sort of an expert on, that's really why people would tune into your podcast. What's your expertise? And then lean into that. And there's an audience for it. That's what's great about podcasts. So for us as well, one thing was, in our agenda, we said the Hope Punk thing, but we also have in us, as we're becoming older ourselves, it's kind of like, well, we want to encourage that next generation of writers and filmmakers and authors and stuff like that. So in the podcast, that's what we quite often are also talking about. So we're not just reviewing a film, we're also saying, hey, these are the beats of a story. If you're a writer out there, do you know about the beats? And we're trying to pass on our information. Or if we learn something from the filmmaker, that the film we're talking about, in our research, we're passing that on. Pass on that information. So just a question for you to think about is like, why do you listen to a podcast? And if you don't, well then listen to podcasts that you might be interested in making. So just a quick rundown on the equipment.
So recommended equipment. So we've gone, for 3 years in Space Brains. I was podcasting a couple of years before that. Got a few ideas of what to do. Starting off, as I said, my lapel mic was $2 and it came with free shipping. It took 8 weeks to arrive, that's fine. But for $2, it was a no-brainer. I mean, that was almost more expensive the time it took me to click to buy it than it was to actually pay for it. Mark, he already started off with his lapel from Rode. So if you don't mind waiting, by all means, get the $2 job. Let's face it, most people listen to podcasts on relatively low quality earphones or earbuds or in the car while they're driving. They're not looking for the audiophile experience, except maybe if you're doing an audiophile music show, you might want to be a bit more high tech on that, but you probably already have the equipment if you're that into it. So don't spend a lot. $2 for a lapel microphone will get you started. You can buy more than that. Here's something I prepared earlier.
While Surrey does that, you do also need some good headphones, all right? So you can listen to your own voice, but you can listen to your own podcast. Mentioned before, to record, mobile phones are good starting points, how we started. Computer is obviously your next step, and then a full-blown mixer would be the third step, okay? The location, quiet place, as we mentioned before. And then just in terms of editing, there's a couple of examples there. So as I said, your phone does have free editing. You can use on Apple stuff like QuickTime. Again, that's free if you have an Apple product. Surrey recommends that programs he mentioned before.
Audacity.
Yep.
Audacity and Persona Studio One.
Yep. And then another option is the Adobe Audition platform, which is a subscription kind of high-end editing at about $30 a month.
Yeah, so here's the earphones that I have upgraded to. They're a bit of Sennheiser phones. I think they're $80 on special. The main reason I like these for podcasting, and you don't have to get this particular model, number one, it has a cable, it's not a Bluetooth. Bluetooth can have a delay between what you're seeing on your audio editing and what you're hearing. That makes it almost impossible to edit well. The other thing is it's got very nice, big, comfortable foam pads that fit over my ears because I will be listening on this for 2 hours at a time, and my cheaper headphones tended to squash my ears and they hurt. And if they hurt, then you don't want to do your editing, do you? So that's quite...
As we said, we can keep talking, so we kind of need to move along a little bit. Sorry, that's what I have to do on the podcast too. So this is also a little setup. What's important about this quickly?
The important points here is this is a condenser microphone with what's called a cardioid shape. In fact, on these microphones, I noticed that they show the shape. So so you've got two types. You've got non-cardioid and cardioid. Cardioid will have a sensitive zone and a non-sensitive zone. So this side here, where the pop shield is sensitive, the back side not, and the sides almost not at all. So we sit facing opposite each other, two of these, facing ourselves, and that means we don't get mic bleed, which is where his voice gets picked up by my microphone and my voice by his microphone, which tends to give a slight echo effect. And if you listen to our earliest episodes, you'll hear that, some worse than others, because the lapel mics don't have this pattern.
Yeah.
It's also a condenser mic, which means you need a power source for it, as opposed to a dynamic mic, which is more like my Xbox Rock Band mic, which is more sensitive and is suitable for a live stage situation, not so much a studio situation. This setup here with a pop shield, boom arm, power, cables was $55 from AliExpress, one of my favourite cheap places to go. You can get the same things resold on Amazon if you prefer to use Amazon shipping or whatever. It's all the same stuff, comes from the same place. The quality from it does need a little bit more equalisation, but otherwise, you can, of course, go upward and pay. I think the top quality studio mic is a $4,000 job. The difference in quality between the $4,000 job and that one, for the case of podcasting, is not a lot. For the case of broadcast live stuff or trying to capture a singer, yeah, you want to pay $4,000 if you're trying to do some proper singing. But if you're just talking $55, $60, you're fine.
Okay, so you've recorded, you've edited, and then hosting. Like I mentioned before, hosting's quite important for podcasting because that's how you get it out there on the actual podcast platforms. We've used a couple of other ones. Again, Pinecast is a really great one to start with, free. Okay, so, and then it can be upgraded. So it's a really good, just, if you're starting out, that's a great one. Libsyn, I think, is how you say it, is another one, which is a little bit older and it is quite expensive. Like a lot of online stuff, the more you start paying, there is more and more services. But again, starting out, that's where you can go, and you know that you can upgrade as you go along. And there's a bunch of other ones there. Then with graphics, like we mentioned before, again, free stuff online depending on your background. If you've got an Adobe background, use that, of course. But otherwise now stuff like Canva is incredible. PicMonkey's another one. Plus, if graphics are really not your thing, Fiverr. And there's other sites like Fiverr where you can hire people to do those services. So create a logo for you quite cheaply.
Our logo is largely off Fiverr, and I think it was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's quite affordable. And it was some guy from Central Europe somewhere who was passionate about doing logos for podcasts.
Yeah. Quite often on stuff like Fiverr, you are supporting like a student just in another country, and they're offshoring that talent, at a different rate. And then just really quickly, music. If you do want to have music, again, copyright's a big one, because remember, you're publishing it. Same in the film world, same in the TV world, whatever. Radio shows, they pay for copyright, okay? So when you hear those songs, they're paying a copyright fee. Same in a big movie, you hear a known song, they're paying to have that song in the movie. It's not just there for free. And it's the same with this. So you need copyright free. Again, online now, there's more and more sites that are offering free copyright songs. The more you pay, the more specialised the music is. I mean, you could hire a musician as well, or if you know how to play guitar, you could record yourself a theme song.
Yeah, all the music on Exit Plan, I made myself for that, using a drum tracker and my guitar and audio equipment I've got.
So there's ways around that. YouTube now actually has a copyright-free music channel. So that means that musicians are putting stuff up that you can use for different purposes. If you do want to pay, something like Soundstripe's quite a good site. I use that with a lot of my films actually. And it's a site full of music, sound effects, all that sort of stuff. And it's all completely copyright-free. That gives you the licenses across TV, film, radio, all that sort of stuff. And that goes for about $29 a month. You can, of course, hire someone particular. So some tips for podcasting success, First one, make it past 6 episodes. Not many make it past the 6th episode. In fact, most quit before they get to the 6th episode, all right? So if you get to episode 7, you're up there. You're on your way, okay? So just keep going. Have a very clear schedule, whatever that means to you. For us, it was fortnightly, okay? And there was one point, we've been sick a couple of times. We've got kids that get sick. We work around that. We've recorded externally. I've recorded in my car and speaking to Surrey over Zoom, just because that's the best I can do in a particular, scenario.
Particularly when we're in isolation.
Stuff like that.
Year.
Yeah.
On.
But whatever it might be, a lot of times podcasts can be 10 episodes. So create a season. So you're going to do 10 episodes and then that's it. The other thing we did, and we keep doing it, is we commit to the year, and at the end of the year, we decide if we want to go another year. Okay, so that's our season. The time commitment, just be aware, maybe up to about 10 hours a fortnight is our time commitment to create an episode, publish it, edit, record, everything.
That's 10 hours for one of us.
Yeah.
So because you can imagine there's about 2.5 hours to record an episode, we each have to spend that time.
Yeah.
And there's editing and there's got to watch the movies.
Yeah. Damn it, I've got to watch another movie.
Actually, sometimes that does require finding time on the commute to sit there and watch it on Netflix or whatever. But it is a little bit more time consuming. I just want to bring this back to the pace and the schedule with the time commitment. Doing a weekly show is very hard to do. So my the exit plan audio drama, I pre-recorded as much as I could, and then weekly. My other one, which is called My Creativity, which was that was a weekly show, and one of the reasons I stopped it after 60 whatever episodes is because it becomes almost unmaintainable to do that every week. So fortnightly, and even that sometimes we end up having to scurry a bit. So really, you've got to make sure that you understand there is a bit of time commitment. It's going to get in the way of birthdays, holidays, being sick, all the rest of it, and you want to commit.
The show goes on. I just know, conscious of time, I think we're almost out of time, or maybe we're already over. So do podcasts make money? They really can, but again, it's in that really top tier. Okay, now Joe Rogan, some of you might know him, like him, hate him, whatever. He's the number one podcaster in the world.
He does make.
He makes money.
Was it $100 million for Spotify? So you can do it. You just have to be really popular.
Yeah, and it kind of, I won't go through all these points because of time, but that's to give you some ideas, and I'm happy to always chat with people about this afterwards. But there is a good statistic there. It takes about 6 years. So even with us, we're on our 3rd year, and so you keep plodding through it if you want to, and it's kind of almost like that law of attrition rate for podcasts.
And this is why it does have to follow your passion, because it's got to be something you want to be doing anyway. You don't, unless you're already like a radio professional, you've already got all the skills down, you've got all the equipment down, you know how to write things, you're an ex-NPR guy, so you start Gimlet and you immediately can just sell advertising and your shows and then sell Gimlet off to a larger organisation for millions of dollars. Unless you're like that, it's going to take you years of practice and learning and experience.
So the whole thing is, if you've got an inkling and you're here today actually for podcasting, then I would just suggest start one. Just start one. That's how we did. We just started one. There was a lot of thought. There was that planning stage. There was us working it out. But I do think you're better just to begin one. And if you can make it past the 6th episode, you're probably onto something that does have a longer life. So yeah, why not start today? We won't have time for questions now, unfortunately. We'll have to wrap it up there. But again, in the lunch break and stuff, feel free to come and speak to us or reach out to us on our links, okay? Thank you very much, guys, for listening.
Thank you.